By the late 19th century, American industry had accelerated. Steam power, steel production, and mechanized farming pushed the borders of a once fractured republic across the entire continent. Look at this 1869 photograph marking the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. Thousands of miles of track had finally connected the Atlantic to the Pacific, shrinking a treacherous 6-month overland journey down to a single week. But a few blocks away from those corporate triumphs lived the people who actually built them. Millions of immigrant laborers crowded into squalid, freezing tenements, working dangerous jobs for pennies a day, and facing crackdowns when they tried to organize. American history is defined by a grueling 400-year negotiation between the founding promise of equality and the persistent reality of exploitation. That tension started long before the nation even existed. In the 15th and 16th centuries, European colonists crossed the Atlantic, searching for religious liberty and untapped economic opportunity on a vast, resource-rich continent. But that land was already occupied by hundreds of thousands of Native Americans living in complex societies. The arrival of European settlers introduced devastating foreign diseases and sparked relentless territorial wars that decimated indigenous populations. To extract the wealth of this new frontier, the colonies turned to human bondage. This map details the Atlantic Triangle Trade, a logistical network that brought the first enslaved Africans to Virginia in 1619. This established a system of chattel slavery designed to fuel a highly lucrative cash crop economy. The very soil that provided the colonists with newfound freedom and wealth was simultaneously fertilized by forced displacement and systemic enslavement. In 1776, those colonies rebelled against the British Empire. They drafted a declaration asserting that all men are created equal, endowed with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yet, when it came time to draft a constitution and bind the states together, the framers intentionally left the institution of slavery intact. Securing the political cooperation of the southern colonies was deemed more critical than applying those unalienable rights to everyone. That compromise held the young Confederation together just long enough to survive its infancy. The United States maintained its sovereignty, eventually having to fight the British to a standstill a second time during the War of 1812. By prioritizing national survival over universal liberty, the founding documents baked a contradiction directly into the law, one that would eventually push the country to the brink of collapse. As the 19th century progressed, the country obsessed over manifest destiny, the conviction it was ordained to conquer the continent from coast to coast. That westward push generated rapid economic growth. The 1848 discovery of gold in the California foothills drew hundreds of thousands of prospectors, creating booming new cities and a frantic rush for riches. The cost of that wealth was paid in blood. The federal government forcibly displaced over 60,000 Native Americans in the Trail of Tears and acquired over 1 million square miles of new land by waging war against Mexico. As the borders expanded, the political compromises of the founding era began to shatter. Congress violently debated whether each new Western territory would be admitted to the Union as a free state or a slave state. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 pushed that tension past its breaking point. Southern states, terrified of losing their slave-driven economy, seceded from the Union, plunging the country into the Civil War. The resulting 4-year conflict cost 600,000 lives. As seen in this photograph of Richmond, Virginia, entire cities were bombarded and burned into skeletal ruins. The insatiable drive for continental dominance finally forced the United States to settle the ideological contradiction it had avoided since 1776, but at a staggering cost. The Union survived, and the federal government passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. As seen in the faces of these African American Union soldiers, the laws of the land officially abolished slavery and expanded the rights of citizenship. But the promises of that Reconstruction era were quickly abandoned. Federal troops withdrew, allowing white supremacist violence and Jim Crow laws to systematically strip those rights away from Black citizens across the South. Meanwhile, the northern and western states were building a new paradox. The Gilded Age produced staggering corporate monopolies, protected by armed guards like the one seen here during the Pullman strike, clashing with an underpaid, exhausted immigrant workforce. Yet this era of labor strife also produced massive physical marvels. Men suspended high above the East River laid the cables for the Brooklyn Bridge, an architectural feat that established the United States as the world's largest economy. The Great American Experiment is an ongoing struggle. It is a continuous, frequently violent, and remarkably resilient effort by its people to bridge the gap between the reality they live in and the ideals upon which they were founded.